I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, the average daily number of new coronavirus cases in the U.S. dropping below 100,000 for the first time since October, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. Fox News contributor and board-certified medical doctor Janette Nesheiwat discusses the vaccine rollout, concerns about other virus strains, and why she's optimistic about the nation's fight against COVID-19. And while states begin to ease restrictions on restaurants and other businesses, many school districts continue to struggle with how to return to in-person learning. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace weighs in on the Biden administration's political headache over how and when to get more schools open amid the pandemic, and the nursing home scandal plaguing New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Plus commentary from Fox Nation host Tom Shillue. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Martha McCallum.
I'm Bill Hemmer.
I'm Shannon Bream, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, February 19th, 2021. I'm Dave Anthony. It's a positive trend lately. Fewer Americans testing positive for COVID.
Hopefully it stays like that because we still have those variants that are out there, the UK variant and the South African variant that could be a problem during spring break.
I'm Lisa Brady. The new president and his team hit some turbulence over COVID messaging.
People are going to judge this on the reality of their lives, not whether there was some contradiction between what the president and his press secretary said.
Plus, the former president speaks and cancel culture with Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace.
And I'm Tom Shillue. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
We've seen this trend before when the coronavirus seemed to be on the decline late summer. And then, as we were warned, came a big spike in the fall and early winter that we hope peaked last month.
COVID-19 cases have now been declining for 5 weeks.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Nearly every day the past 2 weeks, there have been fewer than 100,000 new cases in the U.S. And if you combine this past Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it still doesn't add up to the one-day record on the Johns Hopkins tracker of 300,000 new infections reported back on January 2nd. But Dr. Walensky also urges us not to get complacent.
Consistently and correctly wearing a mask is one of the most effective tools we have to stop the spread of COVID-19.
And by July, we've been told, there should be enough coronavirus vaccine doses for every American.
Yeah, the numbers, thank goodness, have gone down.
Dr. Janette Nesheiwat is a board-certified medical doctor and Fox News contributor.
And I think it's a combination of factors. We've passed the major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's were definitely, time of the year where we saw a lot of travel, we saw a lot of social gathering, and we saw a lot of spread of the virus. But with that behind us, and also with mitigation efforts of wearing your mask, and maybe even the vaccine may have had a small role in this. We're seeing the numbers finally go down, and hopefully it stays like that because we still have those variants that are out there, the UK variant and the South African variant that could be a problem during spring break.
You said maybe the vaccine. We're doing, according to the White House, a rate of about 1.7 million vaccinations a day, maybe less with the winter storm affecting things across the country in the last week or so. But if you do the math, that's about 12 million people in a week. And the total number of confirmed COVID cases in the U.S. is under 28 million. So that's a lot of people being vaccinated.
It is. It's a good number. We're picking up momentum. More and more are being vaccinated every week, and we've been doing that with Moderna. We've been doing that with Pfizer, and soon, hopefully, we'll have Johnson & Johnson to add to the mix, and also the AstraZeneca vaccine, and even Novavax is coming out with a vaccine. So it's estimated by the end of July that we'll have availability for everyone to be vaccinated. We should have approximately 600 million doses for all of Americans to be vaccinated. So we're on the way there.
People are getting impatient, though. People are getting impatient because they're trying, even those who are eligible are having a hard time signing up.
So what I would say is keep trying. I know it's easier said than done, but be patient. It's not like you have nothing. It's not like you're defenseless without the vaccine. You can still protect yourself by masking and practice physical distancing and avoiding crowds and congregations, and be careful if in social gathering events. That's where we're seeing a lot of the spread of the virus. So we still have the tools, we still have the capability to protect yourself until it's your turn to get your vaccine. But yeah, right now the demand outweighs the supply, but it's just a matter of time until everyone will get it. Don't let your guard down too soon.
Yeah, you referenced these variants, the UK strain, Brazil, South Africa. What is the biggest concern you have about them?
Well, my biggest concern, for example, with the UK strain, it's found to be about 30% more lethal. The UK strain, the South African strain, are significantly more contagious, just in the manner of the spike protein, how it can attach to the cells and infect us easier. So if it can infect us easier, it can spread easier, and that could result in another spike or surge in the next 4 to 8 weeks during spring break. So those are my concerns. Fortunately, the vaccines that we have, the data shows that the vaccines will still be effective against those variants, although slightly diminished effectiveness. But we need to vaccinate as rapidly as possible before the mutations in these variants get to the point where the vaccine is not effective. We're nowhere near that, but I don't want that to happen.
Have you had any patients or seen a lot of patients who've been dealing with a lot of side effects of the vaccines? People talk about getting sick a little bit after the first one or especially after the second one. Have you had a lot of that?
Very, very mild, very, very mild. Maybe a headache, maybe some body aches, some chills or fever for like a day, and then they're back to normal. I had a headache and maybe some body aches for half a day, and it didn't stop me from doing anything I needed to do. Took 2 Tylenol and was fine. The most significant side effect that I've ever had a patient have was actually a very mild rash. But no, I have not had many patients with many side effects. Most of them did perfectly fine and continue to do so. And the risk of any severe side effects or severe allergic reactions is very, very low.
Have you personally, or do you know of people who have tested positive after getting the vaccine? Have you had that yet?
I've had a couple of patients that tested positive, but they only had their first dose. They were not fully vaccinated. So I have had one patient, she was actually 90 years old, and she got her first dose of Pfizer. And then I think about 3 weeks later, she did test positive for COVID, but her symptoms were so mild. She said, I just thought I had a little cold. But she hadn't yet had her second dose, and she did perfectly fine. She recovered perfectly well. She had no complications. She did not have to be hospitalized. She just had a little bit of a runny nose. But that's the only person that I can think of all the hundreds of COVID patients that I've been taking care of over the past few months since the vaccine has been available.
This downward COVID trend has put more focus on reopening classrooms still closed.
We want the children to be in school.
Many parents in areas where kids are still learning at home have been demanding that. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says many districts still need more money to make that happen. There's $130 billion in the proposed new COVID relief package.
You need more space. Therefore, you need more teachers. Therefore, you need more buses for kids to be spaced to come to school. You need better ventilation.
And President Biden says the goal is to get most students, kindergarten through 8th grade, back in classrooms again. Dr. Nesheiwat says they need to be.
We're hurting our children by not getting them in the classroom, psychologically, mentally, physically, emotionally. The benefit of being in the classroom far outweighs any risk of COVID transfer. The data tells us that the transmission of COVID in the classroom is much less of that in the community. So I think if you have a low prevalence of COVID in the community, less than 10% positivity, our schools need to be open. Kids need to be in the classroom. They're not only losing having a loss of learning and education, but it's having a significant mental toll on children, on families, on parents. We're seeing a rise in opioid abuse, alcohol abuse, anxiety, and depression. So I think, we just take a look, for example, at Florida. Their schools have been open. Certain parts of the country, schools have been open. They've been doing well, and we're not seeing any significant differences in the number of cases of areas where they're closed. And if you look at the latest data out of the CDC, the study out of Wisconsin, which followed 17 different schools, they found that only 3% of the COVID transmission within those schools were from the classroom, were from teachers and students. So that was very low and very clear evidence that it's time to open up and get our kids back in the classroom.
And so you agree with the CDC that teachers don't have to be vaccinated in order to be in school? I mean, it's obviously optimal for them, but they don't have to be?
Could it help? Yes, it certainly could help. And that's why, like, for example, here in New York, teachers are getting vaccinated. So I think we need to continue to make them a top priority. But while we're waiting for everyone to get their vaccine, which is, of course, a big problem, the supply, let's not hold back opening the schools because, again, one of the best ways to protect yourself in school is, number one, wearing your mask. Number two, making sure that we have good ventilation and airflow, opening windows, opening doors, maybe having hybrid schedules, making sure that the classes aren't packed, jammed, full, making sure the desks are spread apart. So taking all of these measures and also trying to get your vaccine, I think together will make it safe.
One thing that hardly anyone has talked about in the last several months because of the coronavirus is the flu. And so the statistics for the flu are really something this season. There are somewhere, I've looked at the laboratory, and according to the CDC, around 1,500, a little over 1,500 cases of the flu, one pediatric death, 165 flu-related hospitalizations the entire season.
It's just phenomenal, and I'm so happy to see this, and I'm not surprised. Yes, less than 200 hospitalizations between October 1st, 2020 and between October and February of this year, less than 200 hospitalizations. The year prior, Dave, we had almost 500,000 people who were hospitalized for flu. And the death rate is just almost gone down to nothing. And that's because the same mitigation and prevention measures that we took for COVID work against flu as well. So if you're wearing your mask, if you're keeping your hands washed and clean, avoid rubbing your eyes and your nose, keeping physical distance. And if you get your flu vaccine, you're going to be protected. We had record number of patients getting their flu shots this past year. So I think all of the together really helped make the flu season non-existent, and hopefully it continues like that.
I have not been out too much, and I haven't had a cold for a year at least, and I didn't get the flu either. And have you seen a lot of people with a cold even?
I've had maybe just a couple of patients that have had a cold that tested negative for the flu. They tested negative for COVID, but not many others. And I think that all comes down to a mask use and physical distancing. I've had a few patients with strep throat as well, but not very many. The number of cases, upper respiratory infections, bronchitis, pneumonias have gone down significantly this past year, and I think we can attribute to the mitigation measures that we used to fight COVID.
It's different with flu and cold. Obviously COVID was so airborne and so contagious that way. But with flu and cold, a lot of times, when we're at work with people or at school with people, we're spreading it by not having our hands washed. But nowadays, people are washing their hands a ton. Do you think that trend is going to continue and that's going to be the way it is?
Yes, and I hope it does continue, because one of the best ways to prevent the spread of infection, especially in hospitals, is simply by hand washing. And that's why we're seeing, sanitizing stations and hand washing stations pop up in public areas, in airports, in shopping centers, in the schools. So all these measures can help reduce transmission of virus, of bacterial infections, and so hopefully it will become a norm for us as we move forward.
Dr. Janette Nesheiwat, Fox News medical contributor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful day.
This is Tom Shalhoub with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
A month into the Biden administration and a year into the pandemic, some rough sledding for the new president, especially on COVID-related issues. In addition to the ongoing challenges with the vaccine supply, virus variants, and mask fatigue, those school reopening questions keep coming back around. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki says President Biden is focused on returning to how schools were before the pandemic.
We are also going to be guided by science. We are going to be guided by our medical experts. We are going to be guided by the guidelines of the CDC.
But what does open actually mean? Psaki suggesting recently that as little as 1 day a week of in-person instruction could count. President Biden later said that was a mistake.
Well, it's not good when the president says that there was some miscommunication of how open schools will be within 100 days, whether it'll be 1 day a week or 5 days a week.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
Having said that, I don't know that it really matters, because in the end, what really matters isn't what the spokesperson says, is whether the schools are open. And that's what the Biden administration is going to be judged on, is not words or message, although I will agree with you that the message has been somewhat garbled. But the key is going to be, are more people going to get vaccinated? Are they going to get vaccinated faster? Are schools that are closed going to reopen, or if they're partially open 1 or 2 days a week, are they going to be open 5 days a week? In the end, people are going to judge this on the reality of their lives, not whether there was some contradiction between what the president and his press secretary said.
And then in the meantime, we had Vice President Harris seeming to contradict what Dr. Fauci had said about not starting from scratch on vaccines. Is the media pressing enough on these kinds of things, or is the administration getting a pass?
No, I think it was interesting to watch. And I think to a certain degree that the impeachment trial kept a lot of, I don't know about the country, but certainly the media focused on Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, although he's certainly going to continue to be a factor in our politics, but with impeachment over, I think there's more of a focus on what the administration is or isn't doing. And Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show did a pretty tough interview of Vice President Harris on questions of the COVID vaccine and also about schools. And it was interesting because Savannah was pressing the vice president on this issue that in the latest CDC guidelines, they say it is not a precondition that teachers have to be vaccinated to go back to schools if you have a safe environment and ventilation and all of that stuff. And she kept pressing Harris to say it, and she wouldn't say it. And, it seemed to me, as just an observer, that there was some politics at play there. Harris kept ducking the question of whether they had to be vaccinated and kept saying, we want teachers to be, a priority group for vaccination. I think that has a lot to do with the connection between the Democratic Party and the teachers union. But it was a tough interview, and good. That's what we need to be. We need to be as tough on liberals as conservatives, on Democrats as Republicans.
Former President Trump kind of broke the ice Wednesday, so to speak, talking to Fox News about Rush Limbaugh. Do you think that we'll see more of him now? And is President Biden dreading that? Or do Democrats think it hurts Republicans if Trump stays front and center?
Oh, I think Democrats probably like Donald Trump being out there. I think they see him. It's the flip of what I just said to you, which is that to the degree that Trump leaves the scene or is absent on the scene, there's more focus on what the Biden administration is or isn't doing. But Donald Trump is such a focus of attention that when he's out there, and particularly when he's out there creating a serious split inside the Republican Party, when he takes off after Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and McConnell takes off after him, I think Democrats just lick their chops, just as Republicans lick their chops when you've got AOC and Bernie Sanders saying that Joe Biden isn't going far enough. When your enemy is destroying itself, stay out of the way and let them continue.
Well, and then we have the scandal involving the anti-Trump Lincoln Project, which I know says it wasn't just about anti-Trump, but Are they hurting chances for unity in the Republican Party, or are they over as a group, as even some supporters have been suggesting?
I think they're pretty much over. And look, of course, it was an anti-Trump group. It really was a trolling group that put out these effective videos. You can argue whether they were accurate or not, but they clearly were trolling Donald Trump, and I think probably getting under his skin. But as it turns out, that they had some baggage of their own. There are two stories. I mean, there is the John Weaver story, one of the founders of the group, who was sending all kinds of unsolicited messages to young men and offering them internships, and whether that was bait to get them to do the things he wanted them to do. And then there's also a big fundraising issue. They raised something like $90 million. I was shocked at that. And there doesn't seem to have been a full accounting of exactly where that went and how it was spent. I think the Lincoln Group has probably come and gone, and that again, and this is an example of it, that the media needs to be just as tough on people who are in opposition to Donald Trump as in people who supported him.
At the same time, it's all too easy to get canceled nowadays, this cancel culture that people are talking about. Rush Limbaugh is actually someone who survived attacks over the years on his advertisers, for instance, over some controversial things he said. Will it be harder for a personality like him to survive going forward because of the way the climate has become?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the things that I have to say I find shocking, that there seems to be zero tolerance for people making mistakes now. I want to be very careful as I discuss this subject, because you run the risk of antagonizing the thought police, and I'm not scared of them, but I don't want to give them an easy target. And I just think this constant source of outrage that people, it's like you can't make a mistake, or you can't say something, and if you said it 10 years ago, you're held to account. And look, there are things that all of us have said and done that if we had it to take back, and maybe in a different cultural moment, we have all gotten, I hope, smarter and more thoughtful about it. But I don't know, when you see the host of The Bachelor, suddenly there's talk about canceling him because, as I understand it, that he basically was saying, let's go easy on this woman for something she did several years ago. And just the fact that he was saying, let's go easy, now they want to cancel him. It just makes you, I don't know, it isn't good for democracy when, look, we've all learned, and there are different attitudes about race and women's rights and a variety of an LGBTQ, and I understand all of that, and we need to accommodate the times. But the idea that you're held to account, and not just held to account, but can literally be canceled. Your career can be over. You can be thrown out because of something you say or do or said or did some time ago. I think it's very chilling, and the whole point of the founders was a vigorous First Amendment. Let's be able to discuss things, and thought is not action. And the idea that you can sort of be banned from business and society and current life because of something you say, I think is very chilling and very alarming.
There are some people who say that someone who is not being held to account, at least not yet, is New York Governor Andrew Cuomo over what happened with COVID in nursing homes, although he says it's really just an informational issue, that they didn't get information out in a timely fashion. Where do you think that is all heading?
Well, I think he's being held to account now. Now, I don't mean by that there's been any specific action taken, but he's all over the front pages of everything from the New York Post to the New York Times, which is quite a political spectrum. It sure seems like there was an effort to hide where people were dying. First of all, there's the controversial issue that he was sending people with COVID from hospitals to nursing homes, which seems like a really wrong-headed dumb idea. And then secondly, and, this came out of the mouth of one of his top aides, Melissa DeRosa, that they were, when they were asked by the federal government, give us the straight numbers of where people died, that, they seem not to have been ready to hand that information over. And now there are stories that, some of the Democrats, because not just Republicans in New York politics are going after him, it's also Democrats. And he supposedly, this state senator, Mr. Kim, he supposedly said he was going to destroy him. Let me just say, because we had this with T.J. Ducklow, don't ever get on the phone and say, I'm going to destroy you, because, boy, if that ever comes out, the only person who gets destroyed is the person who said it. So, you got to be careful what you say these days. And I don't mean that in the sense of thought police. I mean, just don't be saying things like I'm going to destroy you.
Yeah, writing things down sometimes not a good idea either, historically speaking. Well, Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday, we are always thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
Lisa, thank you.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
The brutal winter weather that left many dealing with snow, ice, power outages, and no water or heat has also brought out stories of kindness. One of those is in Houston, Texas. Jim McIngvale, known as Mattress Mac, has turned his 100,000 square foot North Houston gallery furniture store into a place that people who have no heat or electricity could take refuge.
So we opened the showroom as a shelter for people to come and get warm and get a good night's sleep.
Mattress Mac came onto the national scene in 2017 when he opened his store as a shelter after flooding from Hurricane Harvey left many unable to stay in their homes. This week, hundreds have come to the store to warm up, some of them even spending the night on the beds and couches in the showroom. McIngvale told Fox News he's also been sleeping there.
We got lots of food here. We've got a warm, welcoming place. A lot of people obviously are traumatized. Their homes are cold. They have no lights, no water.
He's also provided meals to people during the coronavirus pandemic. There's even playground furniture in the children's area, and McIngvale says he brought in face painters for the kids.
We'll get through this, and we're here to benefit the community. That's what we've always done, and our job is we have a responsibility for well-being of the community, and we're trying to live up to that.
He says giving back to the community is a way of life for him.
My parents always taught me that the essence of living is giving, so I've tried to live that life and teach it to my children, and my grandchild, Sydney, was at her yesterday. She's learning that the essence of living is giving, so we have an obligation to help the community, not just a responsibility, but an obligation. And when things like this happen, our team members rally around us, and we all get together and see how we can help people that are in need.
Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Tom Shalhoub.
What's on your mind? I'm recording this in my car because that's where I used to spend a lot of time listening to Rush Limbaugh. Just so you guys know, I'm pulling over the side of the road to record this. You see, as a young comedian on the road, I spent a lot of time in my car with nothing but AM radio. And in many parts of the country, the only choices were country music and Rush Limbaugh. Rush was available everywhere. In fact, sometimes you'd be listening and the signal would start to get a little snowy. So all you had to do was turn the dial down a bit, and to the other side of the dial, you'd find another Rush Limbaugh station. And that would take you another 40 or 50 miles to get to the next Rush Limbaugh station. Rush was a really smart guy, but he talked like a regular guy. He didn't make you feel like you were getting talked down to, but he had great insight into the way the world worked. That was his great strength. There's this idea out in the world. You heard it repeated endlessly during his career, and you're hearing it repeated now. The idea he was turning gullible Americans into conservatives, but that's not the way it worked. It was the other way around. There is a lot of conservatives out there in the country who just never had someone articulating so clearly the way that they felt. Rush did that, and he made them want to listen more. That's all. He would ask questions that made you go, yeah, why is that? And you'd think, why didn't I think of that? Rush is gone now, and we're going to miss him. But he has left a very long and deep legacy, and not just from his own show, but the countless other radio hosts and now podcasters that learned their craft from him and model themselves after him. It is a vast world of conservative talk out there, but there's never going to be another Rush.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.